Hello, fellow music educators and flute tutors everywhere. I'm Yamaha performing artist and clinician Tracy Harris, the band flutist, and I'm here with my good buddy, Flute Boot Chops, and we are here to talk to you about hand position. Hand position, so important. Having a consistent, correct hand position every time you pick up your flute, vitally important. It's going to help you have better tone, better intonation, better technique. Bad hand position can be a terrible playing destroyer. So I'm going to show you a few of my favorite tips that help young flutists start out on the right foot when it comes to playing with proper hand position. Okay? So tip number 1, the 2 C's rule. Always have them have their hands in the shape of a C when they put their fingers on the flute. You want to make sure if they can't do that they pretend they're just holding a soda can, flip it over straight onto the flute. Make sure you emphasize that the center of their fingers, they call them the fat pads of their fingers, go over the center of the key. It's got to go over the center of the key. So they're basically just right there in what I call, tip number 2, hover mode. Your fingers must be in hover mode. You want to make sure that these fingers are always directly over the keys when not in use, ready for action. Now, if that doesn't work, you might use the imagery of magnets, metal. Pretend your fingers are magnets and they're touching the metal and they're magnetically attracted. And no matter how much you try to pull the fingers away from the keys, they just keep getting sucked back. So make sure that those fingers are in hover mode all the time. Mirror, 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 mirror work on the wall. That's tip number 3. You've got to make sure you practice in front of a mirror so that you can check whether your hand position is correct. So you can catch yourself making ridiculous mistakes. I do that every day. I'm always looking in the mirror checking for, some weird habit that perhaps I've picked up in the last couple of weeks, or, if my hands are really in the most optimal position. Mirror work is best. It's great for everything and it's free. It's absolutely free. It's best teacher ever. All right, so once you work with the mirror and you're in hover mode, you've got the 2 C's rule going on. You also want to talk about how we're going to hold the flute with your arms. So I call it floaty arms. That's tip number 4. Water up to your chest. Pretend you're in water up to your chest. Your arms would kind of float away from your body and they would dip at the elbows. Floaty arms. I call it floaty arms. Okay. Now, floaty arms leads to, a lot of space between you and the flute because you want to have a lot of space between you and the flute when you play. And you're always pushing away with your right arm so that you have a good 45-degree angle created when you're playing your flute. And that brings me to my next tip. When you have your fingers, when you're placing your fingers on your flute, the thumb, I always put it towards the back of the flute because I need to be able to push forward with my right arm and push into my face with my left arm. It's those oppositional forces that keep the flute feeling like it's safe and secure, like it's not going to fall. So I have a very, very well-earned callus right here. So when I blow, the flute doesn't move. It's very, very stable because I'm pushing forward with my right arm, which you can only do, by the way, if your thumb's in the back. Bringing your thumb forward like this, you have a flutist doing that. You're always going to get fingers overlapping the keys. You're going to get people grabbing onto the mechanism like that. It's not going to be a good situation. So teach them this early on. And it's not completely behind the flute, but it's a ways behind there so that you can push and then push in with your left arm. So oppositional forces, floaty arms, 45-degree angle. Check out my arms, 45-degree angle. And by the way, you are going to see the head tilt to the left slightly when flutists play. Because unless you have really, really long arms like a spider monkey, you're definitely going to have your head tilting to the left because the flute's pretty long. So if I play, my head is going to go to the left. Because if I have my head straight ahead and I bring my flute, I'm having to move my arm way over. So our heads naturally tilt left. There's nothing wrong with that. So 2 C's rule. Make sure the fat pads are centered over the keys. Make sure that you're using oppositional pressure, pressing in towards your face while you're pushing away with your right arm. Keep your thumb towards the back of the flute so you can push forward and have that oppositional pressure. Make sure that you're utilizing floaty arms, up to water up your chest, floaty arms, right? 45-degree angle, and the head cocks a little bit to the left. Now, the only other thing I can talk about is making sure that your hands stay as relaxed as humanly possible, and that's something that will just help eliminate or at least reduce the repetitive motion injuries that you see in a lot of young flute players because they're always gripping the flute too tightly because basically the hand position is incorrect. I hope this was helpful. I will see you at my next video. Happy fluting, everyone, and I will see you next time.